require a
Look at
precedent.
human being.
One
Look
of
at
the
human being. Look at human being.
Hi,
Hey
guys.
fam! So welcome back again to my YouTube channel. So I'm very excited having you guys tuned into this YouTube channel. So today I'm gonna be reacting to a very special buy me coffee request from Sonia Page, and she said I should check out the Nuremberg trial. So stick around with me today as we react to this video, as this video was a subsequent video requested through the Holocaust video. So stick around to the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this YouTube channel. See you on the video. Let's go.
The Nuremberg trials saw the end of a regime that caused the Holocaust, and the Nuremberg trials saw the end of a regime that caused the Holocaust, and it was the first time in history where an international court sentenced people to prison and to death.
Oh, they created
It
an
would later
international
set the
court.
stage
Wait,
for-
sorry. An international court was created for the event of the Holocaust.
Wait, international
No,
court
but no, I
against-
think there's an international court of justice. But
No,
I think
here they said they created it.
it was later said the stage of they were already an international court.
Sorry,
No,
sorry.
he
Let's
just
just go
said-
back. He just said they created it.
sentenced
Sorry.
regime that caused the Holocaust, and it was the first time in history where an international court sentenced people to prison and to
it
death.
was already.
It would later set the stage for an International Court of Justice, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and 2 Geneva Conventions. Germany started the Second World War when it invaded Poland, and eventually attacked over half a dozen countries throughout the continent. But by
Wow.
1943 the tide
You
of
guys
war
spread
had
out.
turned. The Soviet Union was beginning to push back at Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad, while the British meanwhile had beaten back the German air raids and pushed the Axis powers out of Africa. So the leaders of the major Allied powers came together to discuss the state of the world after World War II had ended. Stalin of the Soviet Union, Roosevelt of the USA, and Churchill of the United Kingdom discussed creating the United Nations, the D-Day invasions, and dividing Germany up into 4 occupation zones. Because Germany will be divided. But that was not all. Over the course of World War II, it became apparent that Germany committed atrocities on a massive scale. The night raids, the forced deportations, the mass genocide. There was only one question on everybody's mind. How do you punish acts that are this evil?
Exactly.
To this question, there were basically only
They normally tell you do not punish evil with evil. But in this case, please punish evil with evil. Yes, I know why. If you've actually watched the Holocaust,
Yeah.
you will see how gruesome.
Like you can't
the
you
level.
won't even imagine a human can do
I
that.
don't think I'm
To another
that able
human.
to watch it now.
Oh, please do. No worry, I will show you that video so that you can see.
Just
only
fuck
3 answers. The first was to do nothing. To let all the atrocities, all the death, all the destruction go unpunished.
Why is that?
But
an
how
option?
could any country consent to such a course of action? How could the far-off USA, the invaded Soviet Union, or the occupied Czechoslovakia consent to such a course of action?
Never.
The second option was to put all the perpetrators to death through executive action, to simply give the
I support
command
this.
to kill thousands of people, regardless of whether they committed any war crimes or not. But this action was disliked by both Roosevelt and Churchill at the time.
Why?
And so eventually, by the end of the war, a third option was chosen. Justice through persecution.
Okay.
It was decided that the perpetrators of the Second World War and of the Holocaust would be dealt a fairness and justice that they themselves destroyed in Germany. But that brought up the next question. How do you punish someone from another sovereign country for crimes that are not actually illegal in that country?
Precisely.
The Allied powers answered this question with the London Charter of the International Military Tribunal. This charter laid out a system where 4 different legal codes of France, the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom would be incorporated into a single tribunal. There were prosecutors and defense attorneys according to British and US laws, but decisions and sentences were imposed by a group of judges according to French and Soviet legislation. Furthermore, 4 types
Do you know what it means? The prosecution is done by, the US and because not the French, the US and the UK, because they believe in fairness and everything. But the sentencing was done by the Soviet Union. Now, me knowing that actually that the Soviet Union was used in judging them, I feel very confident that they will actually get what they deserve. Now, I am not really supporting Eve right here, but the truth is this: the level of atrocity these guys, committed. If they go unpunished, people will repeat it.
Yeah.
It will be unfair to the thousands, the mothers, the fathers, the brothers that lost someone that day.
I heard
That's
something
period.
somewhere. They said the aim of that was to also make Africa like a farmland. So imagine
Yes.
if that had happened.
That was the agenda.
The agenda was to
It
turn
was really
Africa to a
bad.
farmland, to turn Poland into a train station.
Wait,
It was that.
It was that bad.
selfish and bad.
That bad. A place flourishing with humanity,
With lives.
with
train
life.
station.
You are turning it to train station, to livestock. For what? Are you God? Sorry for that.
Types of
outburst.
crimes were determined that a person could be indicted for. The first is crimes against peace, which included planning, initiating, and waging wars of aggression or wars in violation of international treaties. The second is crimes against humanity, such as extermination, deportation, and genocide. The third is war crimes. This basically meant a violation of the rules of war that were set before the Second World War, such as executing prisoners. The fourth crime is a common plan or conspiracy to commit any of the three aforementioned crimes. After all, simply because you didn't put anyone in the gas chambers yourself doesn't mean you're not guilty of creating the system leading to such genocide. It would be possible for someone to be indicted for any or all of these crimes. For example, Wilhelm Keitel, who was the de facto head of the German military during the war, was indicted for all four crimes.
Obviously.
He was found guilty on all four charges at the Nuremberg trial and sentenced to death. Or take the case of Julius Streicher,
Yeah,
publisher of an
I love the
anti-Semitic
sentences.
newspaper. He was only indicted for conspiracy and crimes against humanity, and he would only be found guilty of the latter, although he too would be sentenced to death for that crime.
News
It
to
is
my
important
ear.
to note that this is not the only trial. There were several others, such as the doctor's trial and the judge's trial. The Nuremberg trial, however, was only for the worst offenders. Those who had created the system of oppression and extermination in Germany and its occupying territories. One of such worst offenders is Wilhelm Frick, Minister of the Interior and co-author of anti-Semitic laws imposed in Germany before the war. Or Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the highest-ranking SS officer tried at Nuremberg and chief of the intelligence, Gestapo and criminal police. Both of them would be found guilty and both of them would be sentenced to death. In total, 24 men would be indicted at the trial. Of these 24, there are 3 special cases we need to discuss first. First is Martin Baum.
They are sentenced to death because if the 24 of them disagree to be part of such conspiracy,
it won't have
it
happened.
won't have happened.
Yeah.
It's because we are calling Hitler Hitler. It wasn't just him.
Ye-
He had
thank
people
you.
supporting him.
People
Because
that
without
believed in his
support-
agenda.
Because
People
without
that bring ideas
to
to it.
it, because without support, he wasn't going to. It
At
would just
all.
be an insane man with bad thoughts. But because of the backbone he had, that's why everything was implemented.
It was because of the backbone he was able to rise to power.
Yes.
You understand? He rose to power because of the back, and they know of his agenda before pushing him to
Up
power.
there. They deserve it as much as he does deserve it.
Yeah.
Baumann,
Just
who
took the
was
coward's
party
way out.
secretary. He was absent at the trial. He would be found guilty and sentenced to death in absentia. However, it would be discovered in 1972 that he had actually died a few days before the war had ended, but his body wasn't identified before then. There's also the case of Gustav Krupp von Bohlen und Halbach, a major industrialist. He was found medically unfit for trial and passed away in 1950 without sentencing. And thirdly is the case of Robert Ley, head of the German trade unions. He believed that, as the loser in the war, he ought to just be shot rather than to be brought before a tribunal like a criminal. Ley therefore strangled himself
Look at the
in his
pride.
cell 3 days after receiving his indictment. The trial was now almost ready to begin. The war was over, the men had been captured, and the crimes were determined. But there was one more obstacle to overcome before the trial could commence. And that was the problem of language.
Yeah, I
This
was about to
trial
ask that.
was held between French, English, Russian,
Russia.
and German speakers. How were they going to communicate efficiently with each other? IBM came up with a brilliant system that we still use today: simultaneous interpretation. This is
Wow.
the technique
So this
where
was where it was
interpreters
actually
translate
invented.
what is being said while it is being said. And then everybody can listen to the translation in their own native language directly via headphones. This is how, for example, the United Nations and the European Parliament work today. Now it was time for the trial to commence. Each of the 4 countries provided a prosecutor and a team of experts behind them. The defendants were entitled to receive a copy of the indictment made against them, any relevant explanation about the indictments, and to be represented by a lawyer of their choice. And of course, the defendants chose the best German lawyers they could possibly find. To give an example of how good these lawyers are, let's look at the case of Admiral Karl Dönitz, head of the German Navy from 1943 onward. He was indicted because he had ordered his submarines not to help the survivors of any sinking ship, instead letting them drown in the Atlantic Ocean. This was in clear violation of the Second London Naval Treaty. His lawyer, however, would save his life. He presented evidence that the USA had committed the exact same breach of the treaty in the Pacific in its war with Japan, and argued that Dönitz should not be convicted for a crime the USA also committed. And it worked. Karl Dönitz was sentenced to only 10 years in prison. He was released in 1956 and died in 1980. When the trial first started, prosecution was afraid there wouldn't be any evidence that these men were responsible for the atrocities committed during the war. But they forgot the German character. The Germans documented everything. 47 crates of binders, 1400 kilograms of party records, and kilometers of film poured in. Therefore, the prosecution decided not to go directly after the greater atrocities of World War II. Instead, they wanted to lay bare the system of conspiracy that would slowly lead to the Second World War and the atrocities committed in them. They wanted to prove that it was these men who created the system that would lead to these atrocities. From the supposed need for breathing room to feed the German people, to the aspiration of the extermination of what they considered an undesirable population. The prosecution pulled out one incriminating document after another, such as a document that showed how they were planning to start a war by whatever means necessary. It is my unalterable decision to squash Czechoslovakia by military means in the near future. It is the job of the political leaders to bring about the military and politically suitable moment. The primary defense of these actions was that they were only made illegal after the crimes had been committed. But the prosecution countered by stating that the first person to be sentenced for murder could just as easily have argued that nobody had ever been sentenced for murder, so why should they? They argued that some crimes are so universally immoral that it shouldn't require a
Look at
precedent.
human being.
One
Look
of the
at human being. Look at human being. Honestly, to be frank and to be truthful, right? For me, I don't feel like they should actually done this prosecution. Just
There was no need for this
You
trial.
see
Just-
what I'm saying? They were even lenient to them because
They
with
were
the
so-
atrocity these people did,
just
they're supposed to unalive them and their families. To be honest, cut the root entirely
So
from the
like
community.
unaliving them is so easy. It's very easy.
No, I include their family because of. Do you know
They
these
should have
people,
been left in a
children,
room.
kids, pregnant women, like gas station.
They should have been left in a room with the key thrown away for life.
I know. They did too much. Like they did
Defendants,
too much.
Albert Speer, realized that the prosecution, the Allied powers, and the judges wanted to hear an apology, an admission of wrongdoing, an expression of repentance, and so he simply gave them one. He took personal responsibility for the crimes he and his country had committed. While Speer was responsible for ordering the use of hundreds of thousands of slave laborers, he himself was only sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was released in 1966 and died in 1981. Now that the
Guys
prosecution
don't
had
deserve-
presented
don't deserve
that there was
anything.
indeed a common
They
conspiracy
don't
against
deserve
peace and certain types of people, They continued with the greater atrocities of the war. They showed a documentary about the concentration camps, which I will not show here because I do not want any of my audience to involuntarily see the horrific acts depicted in them. If you do want to see the evidence, it is available on the English Wikipedia page on the Nuremberg trials, and I will leave a link in the description. This film showed the horrors of the concentration camps, the piles of bodies, the gas chambers, the unimaginable suffering. People in the courtroom cried. Some even fainted. The defense of these men on trial could largely be summed up as, "I was just following orders." The prosecution deconstructed that argument, stating that men who commit crimes cannot plea as a defense that they committed them in uniform. Military men are not above and beyond the moral requirements that apply to others, incapable of exercising moral judgment on their own. They pointed out that another German general, Erwin Rommel, had been ordered to kill any commandos that he had or would capture, but Rommel had burned the order, showing that even a high-ranking general was able to exercise moral judgment and disobey immoral orders. As the trial progressed, a very curious case became clear, that of Hjalmar Schacht. Schacht was a prominent banker and economist in Germany, having served as president of the central bank and economics minister. While an important figure before the war, he had lost all his power by the time it started, and had even been in contact with resistance leaders until he himself was put in a concentration camp. In the end, he was acquitted and set free, and would go on advising developing countries on matters of finance and economics, and passed away in 1970. By now, all the evidence had been presented, and the accused had been given the opportunity to defend themselves. It was now time to pass judgment. It took the judges 2 days to determine the sentences of these 24 men. 12 were sentenced to death by hanging, 7 were sent to prison, 3 were acquitted, and 2 were left without a decision. Of those men sentenced to death who have not yet been named in this video are Hans Frank, Governor General of occupied Poland; Alfred Jodl, a general in the German military who signed the summary execution of the Allied commandos and Soviet commissars; Joachim von Ribbentrop, ambassador to the UK and later Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was responsible for a treaty that divided Poland up between Germany and the Soviet Union; Alfred Rosenberg, Minister of Eastern Occupied Territories; Fritz Sauckel, head of the slave labor program; Arthur Seyss-Inquart, commander of the occupied Netherlands; and Hermann Göring. We'll come back to him in a little bit. The men sentenced to prison who have not yet been named: Walter Funk, Minister of Economics, and sentenced to life imprisonment, but released due to ill health in 1957 and passed away in 1960. Konstantin von Neurath, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Reich Protector of Bohemia and Moravia, and resigned in 1943, sentenced to 15 years in prison, but released in 1954 due to ill health, and passed away in 1956. Erich Raeder, Commander-in-Chief of the German Navy until his retirement in 1943, sentenced to life imprisonment, but released in 1955 due to ill health, and passed away in 1960. Baldur von Schirach, head of the party's youth division until 1940, sentenced to 20 years in prison and passed away in 1974. And Rudolf Hess. We'll also get back to him later. Out of the 3 men who were acquitted, there was the previously named Schacht, but also Hans Fritzsche, a popular radio commentator and head of the news division of the propaganda ministry. His crimes were not deemed severe enough for this tribunal, and he would later be sentenced to 9 years in prison at a different trial. He would be released in 1950 due to ill health and died in 1953. And there is Franz von Papen. He served as the Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor of Germany, was an ambassador to Austria and later Turkey. He was acquitted at Nuremberg. However, he would later be sentenced to 8 years in prison for his actions during the war. He appealed that decision and was once again acquitted after serving only 2 years in prison, and passed away in 1969. The hangings of those sentenced to death would take place 2 weeks later. Hermann Göring, the highest-ranking man on trial, took one last act of defiance by committing suicide. He was commander of the Air Force, de facto head of the economy, and the original head of the Gestapo. He was found guilty on all charges, and sentenced to death. The hangings were supposed to be done via the standard drop method, where the goal is to break the neck so the person dies instantly instead of suffering a slow strangulation. But some of the hangings were botched and took several minutes of strangulation before they died. Van Ribbentrop took 17 minutes to die, Jodl 18, and Keidel 28. The bodies were then cremated and the ashes dumped into the river. The last one of these men to die was Rudolf Hess. He flew to Scotland in 1941 to negotiate a peace treaty with the British, but was instead imprisoned. Thus, he didn't participate in many of the atrocities. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and died in 1987 when he strangled himself at the age of 93. The prison was demolished to prevent it from becoming a shrine to followers of that toxic ideology, but instead his burial site became a destination for yearly pilgrimages by neo-Nazis. So when the lease on his burial site ended in 2011, his grave was reopened, his remains cremated, and his ashes scattered at the sea. And so ended the regime that started the Second World War in Europe, committed genocide with a brutality rarely seen in history, and took the lives of 50 to 56 million people. This video was only a summary of the Nuremberg trials. I had to leave out many things, such as the fact that the Soviet Union committed many of the same atrocities but were not put on trial, or why Nuremberg was chosen as the location. Therefore, if you're interested in reading more about the topic, I will provide a few sources down below where you can learn more about the subject. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and press the subscribe button. My next video will finish the series on the Tulip Mania, and after that I will start a new series on the Aztec Empire. If you want to see those and other videos as soon as they come out, press the subscribe button.
Wait, I have a very huge question before I really get into the details of this trial. Because I remember, now that this was said now, I even remember that during the time that the Nazis were attacking the Polish people, the Soviet Union also attacked. They also
Somebody
attacked them.
commented, it gotta be bizarre being sentenced for invading Poland by the same Russians
Who helped you invade?
This whole thing is just
It's not
clear.
it's
The
biased.
bias.
The judgment was biased. It wasn't fair because
No,
everybody
no.
would have been. It
The
was
thing
fair,
is, it
but
was fair for those ones that
Yes.
committed the crime. What I was saying is that why
Why
were
wasn't-
they excluded?
yes,
Why was the Soviet Union?
that's where I came in with.
And they were
being
even
unfair.
part of the people that
People, according to this video, they did more.
Because Poland wasn't just invaded by Germany alone.
No,
You've seen the history that at some point the both parties
we are attacking from the right and the
together.
left. They choked like it was. They took Warsaw. That they literally had to be. Polish people had to be hiding underground.
Yeah, I've seen a video like that.
It was terrible.
But honestly, this Holocaust of a thing is an issue that I don't like diving into because it just mess with your emotions.
Relax.
It just show you how corrupt the world is. For the Soviet nation not to be punished, neither was the Russian. It just show you how corrupt human minds are. Meaning the justice was not given to the people that actually died. during
Just
the
a few,
Holocaust.
yeah.
Just a few, and that's not a complete justice. If they have to do the correct job, meaning they have to go back and start all over again.
You see, they had three options. Number one is off the table, which is for them not to do anything. Number two is just to sentence every single person that was involved in this to death. Whether you committed the atrocity, you helped plan the atrocity, and that is where I stand. But they went with prosecution. And in the result of prosecution, you saw that 3 people managed to escape.
And even the people they are removing from the cell because of their ill. At some point, people were in consecration camp with different kinds of
Starving,
sickness.
starving. Like you could literally see
There was
their
no
bones
mercy.
sticking out of
There
their
was no
ribs.
mercy. So those people
They don't
removed,
deserve
they don't
it.
deserve it. Those people weren't humans. They were
For
something
goodness sake, they
else.
don't deserve it. And yet, because they are ill, you release them.
No, they should be there.
They should
to
be
face
there.
What they put other people through.
If they go through it, they will never want to subjugate another human being to such cruelty.
And to even see some people were even worshipping the last guy.
Like,
Because it's just
I can't imagine
God.
such sickening ideology.
how do you starve a human being? Like, as I am right now, I'm hungry. I've actually eaten in the morning.
But
Then
yours
imagine
is
starving people for
lunch.
days.
Yes, months.
Honestly, I am pissed off.
These
You know,
are
this is not the justice I was hoping for, to be frank. Good as it might look to you people, but it's not the justice I was looking for. I was looking for them to pay, both in blood and in every means possible.
Talking about 56 million people
56.
lost their life.
Mm.
Don't worry. Let us know what you.
I'm going to end this video here. I will dig more into this. I want to know what really happened. Those videos that he pointed out where to check them, I will go and check them. Thank you for sticking around to this part. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this YouTube channel. And thank you to Sonia Hage for recommending this video, even though the video kind of like pissed me off, like gave me more insights on what I didn't even know about, and it's now making me angry that this kind of justice was presented. But I really do love the fact that most of them were brought to justice, and I thank you for recommending this video through the Buy Me Coffee link. And please do also recommend more video for us to check out through the Buy Me Coffee link. Thank you guys, and see you on our next update. For now, remain blessed and
no, this thing pain me.
What
what
mean they
kind
don't
of
persecute Russians? I was just seeing to accident there. My
you're
mind.
supposed
You just